the religious history of mankind can be divided into these two eras. One is the prophetic era, which means an era in which God sent his prophets and in which he communicated to people through his prophets. And then came Muhammad, the last of the prophets, and with him, God terminated the prophetic era, which means that prophets of God will no longer come after him. And then we had the post-prophetic era, which is the era in which we are now living in. We are living in the post-prophetic era, which means that now there is not going to be any single messenger of God. So now the point that you would like to understand, and which is very important to understand if you would like to have a deep grasp of the Quran, is that there is a feature of the prophetic era which is not found in the post-prophetic era. There is a feature, there is a trait, there is a characteristic found in the prophetic era, not found in the post-prophetic era. And that is in the life of every messenger of God. So remember, there's a difference between a prophet and a messenger, like a Nabi and a Rasul. A messenger of God is someone who creates a miniature day of judgment on the face of the earth. So the day of accountability of his people takes place in this world. Just like everyone is going to be held accountable on the day of judgment, so that's a greater day of judgment. But in the era of God's messengers, what happens is that in the life of each messenger, not prophet, messenger, in the life of every Rasul, like Jesus, like Moses, like Abraham, like Lot, like Noah, all these are messengers of God. What they do is that the accountability of their nation, of their people, is settled in this world. People who are right, they are rewarded in this world. People who are wicked, they are punished in this world. And this is wholly a feature specific to the era of God's messengers. In the post-messenger era or the post-prophetic era, this feature is not present. In other words, if you do good, you may or may not be rewarded in this world. If you do bad, you may or may not be punished in this world. Your accountability has been deferred to the hereafter. In the prophetic era, the accountability is not deferred. It takes place right at the spot. It takes place right in the time of God's messengers. And the last time it took place was in the time of God's last messenger, Muhammad, peace be upon him. The topic of the Quran is a narration of that last judgment that took place in the time of Prophet Muhammad, in which the fate of people was decided. People were rewarded or punished in this world. And this is much like, you must have studied the Quran whenever you have got the chance, that if you must have noticed this, that ancient nations like the people of Ad, the people of Shuaib, the people of Lot, Abraham, they were destroyed in this world through natural disasters. That is one way in which God punishes people in this world in the times of his messengers, that people who now this is something very important, very, very important. People who intentionally deny the truth, deliberately, out of fully understanding that I believe this thing to be the truth, but I'm not going to accept it. Such people are punished in this world, and it is such people who are called kafir. So a kafir is a person who knows the truth very well, but says, I'm not going to accept it. So in the time of God's messengers, these people are delivered the truth by none other than the messenger himself, as an envoy of God, as a representative of God on earth. And he tells them what right and wrong are. He removes their confusions and their misconceptions. And then he also does not know whether these misconceptions have been cleared or not. It is God who then tells him that now you have done your duty. Now you just dissociate yourself from these people. They are not worthy of being addressed. You come out of there, and I'm going to destroy them through tornadoes or cyclones or earthquakes, or through other means as well. So the important thing is to understand that the Quran is basically relating the story of that accountability that took place for the last time in the era of Muhammad, peace be upon him. How he delivered the truth to his people. And we know from history and from, of course, the Quran also that his people, most of them accepted faith. Very few of them remained. And those who remained, they were put to death. They were executed either because of their deliberate denial or they were asked to live a life of subservience. So remember, in the hereafter, people who do shirk, who are polytheists, God says, I'm not going to spare the polytheists because they don't have any reason for polytheism, and I'm going to, they're going to be condemned to eternal hell. So in this world also, only and only in the prophetic era, not beyond the prophetic era, people who insist on polytheism in spite of knowing that it is wrong. This is very important to know. There's no misconception. There is no lack of understanding. There's no lack of information or communication. They fully understand that God is one. But they say, we're not going to believe that God is one. Or something else in which they are absolutely clear of, but they insist. These are the people who are then, they receive their reckoning in this world. So the Quran is a book in which this reckoning is discussed time and again, not only of Prophet Muhammad, because of course he took this in the case of his nation, but of the previous messengers also. So the important thing is that in the prophetic era, this reckoning or day of judgment arrives for the nations right in their own times, and they are either done away with or rewarded. But in the post-prophetic era, this does not happen. Now, what has happened today is that the likes of Mullah Omar, Osama bin Laden, and all those people who today become militant for the cause of Islam, they draw inspiration from these acts of the prophets of God solely meant for the prophetic era. And they say that, well, if they did it, and if they killed people because they did not believe, we are also going to do that. Now, this is the thing that they have wrongly understood, because that was something that was just the privilege and prerogative of God's messengers. Because it was not those messengers who were conducting these wars or maybe killing people or through natural disasters they were being punished. It was God himself who was doing this through the agencies of these natural disasters or his messengers. In the post-prophetic era, he has left that accountability to the hereafter. And for people like us, when we read the Quran, we read the tale and the account of these nations, and we come to the conclusion that today, if we are not being held accountable for a lot of bad things that we do every day, it's not that it's not going to happen. It's just being deferred to the day of judgment. And the reason is that if people were judged in this world in the prophetic era, because the prophet of God had come to them and he had delivered the truth, and now they had deliberately denied, this cannot happen today, because neither are we so perfect to deliver the truth to its ultimate extent, nor can we say that any non-Muslim today is intentionally denying. Because you see, intentional denial is something that relates to the heart, your intention. In the prophetic era, God communicated this inner intention of deliberate denial to his messengers. Even a messenger did not know this. He had to communicate this. And of course, today, in the absence of this communication from God, we cannot know if a person belonging to the non-Muslim denomination is denying something deliberately or not. So therefore, today, we cannot extend that accountability that took place through God's messengers in today's era, and which has been erroneously done by these militants today, who think that if the prophet lifted arms and killed people for this reason, we can also do that. No, we cannot do that, because it was only the privilege and the prerogative of God's messengers. We don't have this prerogative or the authority to do so. We just read the Quran, and when we read their stories, all that we can draw a conclusion is that if their accountability took place in this world and our accountability is not taking place, we should not be negligent of the fact that it will never take place. It's going to take place. The only thing is it's deferred to the day of judgment. So I've tried to be very brief and very concise. Yes, in some case it was an oversimplification, but this is perhaps the key, the real key to understanding the Quran, that wherever you encounter harsh verses, you'll find the same in the Old Testament also, in the Torah. And wherever you find eternal hell being discussed, mostly, And wherever you find the rage and the fury of God, really, I mean, you find it as if it is coming out of the pages of the Quran. It is on in the case of such people who had deliberately, you see, it's not any lack of information, it's not out of any confusion, as is the case today. A lot of non-Muslims would not believe because they don't have the right message and they don't have access to the right thing. But God makes sure that in the times of his messengers, no confusion should arise. The messenger would perfectly communicate the truth, and the deniers would be people who would be pointed out by none other than God himself that these are the people who are now left with no excuse. And this precisely in the terms of the Quran, I'm just going to use a very difficult word or expression. You just need to just listen to it. It's called Itmam al-Hujjah. Itmam al-Hujjah, which means conclusive communication of the truth. The truth is conclusively, absolutely perfectly conveyed to the addressees in times of God messengers, but not in today's times, not in the post-prophetic era. So, I mean, this is the thing that you have to understand, that today, if there is militancy in the Muslim world, today, if you see people fighting or killing in the name of Islam, it is by not understanding that they think that they had the same authority as God's messengers, whereas the Quran says that this is solely the prerogative of God's messengers, because even God's messengers in those cases are not fighting for themselves. It is God as if he's doing that. He's just using his messengers. So he's going to create a greater day of judgment, and he created miniature days of judgment in the life of every messenger of God, so that people who are living in the post-prophetic era, people like us, we read the Quran and not start doing what those people did, but immediately draw this conclusion that if our reckoning is not coming here, it's going to come one day in the hereafter. So we need to be careful that if the reckoning of those people in the prophetic era took place in this world and our reckoning is not coming, God is not going to be different for two different eras. He is going to call us to account also, but the only thing is that is deferred to the hereafter. This is something that I would have liked you to understand, and I hope that this is something that I was able to put across, because when we be studying the verses of the Quran, especially the verses which say that you kill the idolaters, or you, for example, impose jizya, or you don't make friends with non-Muslims or the kafirs, these verses actually relate to the prophetic era. People or individuals who deserve this because they did it intentionally. Today, a non-Muslim is neither being conveyed Islam in the perfect way as messengers of God would have done, nor do we know if he or she is denying deliberately, intentionally, while absolutely knowing what the truth is. So you see, this is a world of difference. And let me also inform you that this is like maybe 100 years ago, or maybe a little more than that. So there was a Prime Minister of Britain who's called William Gladstone. This is like the 1890s or something like that. So he had the privilege of being the Prime Minister of Britain 4 times. So he was elected 4 times as the Prime Minister. And he is reported to have said in the British Parliament, referring to the Quran, he said that as long as this book survives, as long as this book remains on the face of the earth, we cannot think of world peace. And he was right, I think so. Because without knowing that the Quran has a lot of things specific to the era of God's messengers, we, or many of our scholars, have extrapolated it, have derived the same inspiration without realizing that it was specific to God's messengers, and have started to kill people in the name of God, in the name of Islam, in the name of converting them, in the name of spreading the Islamic empire, without knowing that they were not spreading Islam through the sword or killing people in the name of Islam. All that they were doing was implementing God's punishment. That's going to be implemented anyway in the hereafter. So all that they were doing they were implementing it at the behest of God, at the order of God, at the command of God in this very world, because it was like God himself who was doing it. And in order to make us living in the post-prophetic era more and more alive to the situation that this is going to occur, these tales have been repeated in the Quran. So if you read the Quran, you'll find these ancient nations being discussed time and again. the Ad, the Samud, the Shuaib, the people of Shuaib, the people of Lot, the people of Moses and Jesus being discussed repeatedly. And of course, the idolaters. Why? Because we are being told repeatedly that look what fate they reached ultimately. Your fate is not going to be any different if you follow their footsteps. The only thing is it has been deferred to the hereafter.